Good evening. I'm Dick Ober. I'm president of this remarkable foundation. So to Wayne and Josh and Molly and Martha and Bishop Rob, thank you for sharing your stories of community. I have to say I feel a little bit superfluous after listening to your testimonies. Bless you. I also want to add my appreciation to Sherry Young for being such a terrific board chair and our partnership in the last 2 years, to Ken for stepping into that role, and to Jerry Ann and Joe for joining the board. So ever since my wonderful colleague, Kristen Oliveri, came up with tonight's theme, I've been asking myself, so where do I find community? I find it at the Dublin General Store, where we catch up with town news and neighbors and eat some of the best cookies in New Hampshire. With a group of old friends where we spend hours every few months in the woods or a sugar shack and we just talk about pretty much everything. I find community at Moco Arts in Keene, where my wife Liz volunteers, our daughter Daisy dances, and kids of all abilities and all ages learn and perform together. And I find community right here in this room every year, with doers and donors and civic leaders and advocates and community leaders. And I find community every day with my amazing colleagues on the foundation staff. I hope that you're asking that same question tonight, inspired by the powerful answers that you've heard. These stories remind us that finding and building community takes courage, and it takes its twin, vulnerability. It takes grit, it takes compassion, and it takes love, especially in fractious times like these. Community, and you've heard the word a lot tonight, and that's by design, because it means many things. A place on the earth, a group of people with whom we have shared experiences, even tragic, transformative. It can mean chats and memes on a 5-inch screen. That word, it evokes a sense of belonging and of well-meaning and well-being. But let me take a handoff from my very wise friend, Bishop Rob, and raise a small caution flag about this word. Community is a wonderful thing, but defined too narrowly, paradoxically, it can become fragmentation. Human beings are social animals. We commune more easily with those who look like us, who think like us, worship like us, have similar backgrounds, bank accounts, education, and increasingly, we self-gerrymander by living near people along those same lines. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but when we're not proximate with people of different lived experiences and different perspectives, at best, it limits our understanding and empathy. And if we identify only with those who reinforce the sometimes self-righteousness of our own worldview, we get echo chambers and gridlock. Take that further, and we see ideological communities of Americans today parroting shockingly anti-democratic notions that political disagreement is treason, that a free press is the enemy of the people, that the rule of law is selective. We've seen that movie before, and it doesn't end well. And at the extremes are communities based on intolerance and hate, white nationalists, homophobes, and xenophobes, and terrorists. And through technology, these voices can metastasize and amplify in ways that we really don't understand. 75 years ago today, the US, the UK, and our allies landed in Normandy. The resolve and the sacrifice that D-Day represents inspires awe and reflection. Reflection about the horror and the failure of war, and our unpaid debts to active troops and veterans, and perhaps the inevitable comparisons between the national unity of World War II and the disunity of today. And yeah, our current capacity to solve public problems seems at times to be utterly unmatched by the challenges that we face. Wealth inequality, climate change, inadequate health care, racism, mass human migration, to name a few. That dysfunction in our national discourse is exhausting. But here's the thing. Renewal in America and the shared will it takes to create truly great, lasting solutions won't happen on Twitter, won't happen with talking heads on cable TV, and it probably won't happen in Washington. It will happen as it always has, from the ground up, with people like Martha and Josh and Molly and Wayne. And that's where the best philanthropy happens too. Because at the risk of maybe sounding a little grandiose, a community foundation like this one, we believe, is philanthropy of and by and for the people. So the work starts with the tremendous generosity of donors. Beginning with one bequest in 1962, nearly 2,000 individuals, families, and businesses have established funds here. These funds vary widely in scope and in purpose, but the people who set them up share two things: an abiding love for New Hampshire and a desire to amplify their giving and give back. Scores of those donors are here tonight, and thank you, thank you. So that's of, by. Grant and scholarship decisions at this foundation are not made solely by a small staff and board of directors. They are made by hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. First, the donors who set up the funds, and then we further democratize that with over 400 volunteers sharing that power of decision-making, regional advisors and grant committees, local scholarship groups, even most recently a group of high school students who have designed and built a grant program of their own in the North Country. There's a trendy term for this in philanthropy, participatory grant making, but for us, it's been in our DNA from the beginning. It's simply who we are. And of course, foundation assets, which we think of as fundamentally charitable, public charitable assets, are governed by volunteers who live right here in these communities. And the work is done by hundreds and hundreds of nonprofit organizations, and you've seen just a few of those examples tonight. So of, by, and most importantly is for. All this is for the people of New Hampshire. We envision strong, just, and resilient communities where all residents have access to high-quality health care, housing, and food, to fair and equitable education regardless of what district they live in, to the great outdoors and clean water and air, to art and culture, to economic opportunity, and to meaningful civic engagement. It's not about making it easier for those of us who already have access to those things. It's about creating equity of opportunity for those who don't. That's why we launch New Hampshire Tomorrow. It's about changing systems, and it's about challenging assumptions. And here's one of those assumptions. So contrary to our myth about the American dream, social mobility is declining. A child born in 1980 is 40% less likely to surpass her parents than a child born in 1950. If you're born poor, you're highly likely to stay poor. If you're born poor and black or brown, it's far worse. These inequities, they are baked into our social, our economic, and our political system. Here's a personal example. When my dad returned from World War II a year after D-Day, he went to college on the GI Bill. That was his path to prosperity and, by extension, my own. His black Army mates were not eligible for the GI Bill. Creating equitable systems is the work, and in turn, I'd suggest that requires us to redefine what we mean by community and where we find it. And for some of us, it means giving up some power, creating space for other voices and decision makers. So my request tonight is twofold. First, love your communities. As Josh and Molly and Martha and Wayne have, celebrate them, invest in them, serve on your school board, volunteer, vote. And second, think about what Bishop Robb said. Look for community in new places. Walk down Main Street in a growing number of our towns and cities and rejoice in the world languages that enliven our public places in ways they didn't 20 years ago. March in a pride parade this month. Put the phone away and say hello to people that you don't know. Keep weaving that great and unfinished American fabric of many experiences and traditions and cultures into one. And please remember the othering that Wayne experienced as a young boy, because that's happening somewhere near you today. Maybe it's another young African American kid. Maybe it's a transgender coworker, a neighbor with disabilities, a recent arrival from Guatemala or Sudan, an elder next door. Think about your privilege, your access to opportunity, your assumptions, and weave, because that's what's needed. And remember that America has always been renewed from the community up by people like all of you. Thank you. So, I am going to close tonight, and you're going to be on your feet in another minute. I'm going to close tonight by recognizing one of the best and the most modest community builders that I know, Judy Burrows. In the 32 years that Judy has led student aid at the foundation, we have given nearly $100 million in school scholarships to more than, wait for this, 27,000 people. Judy, with her colleagues Hillary, Jess, and Hannah, weave together the aspirations of young people, the tremendous generosity of donors, and the wisdom of local decision makers into tapestries of opportunity and success. Judy retires at the end of this year. That's why we've dedicated the annual report and the annual meeting to her this year. I promised Judy she didn't have to come on stage and didn't have to say anything. So thank you to all of our speakers, to Kristen and Stephanie and Lois and all my colleagues who produce this event every year, and to all of you for what you do. And please join us now for food and conversation in the ballroom. Good night.